King Duo Arnold. Today we are talking about role-playing, lawful, chaotic, and everywhere in between. To help me with that, I brought on two of my friends. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves and then give them a little bit of, like, how you guys got into role-playing.
My name's Brandon Gerbig. I got into role playing when I was around 15 years old. I played D&D Second Edition, and I played for about 3 hours total. And all we did was pick up orc chicks at a bar. And then I got into it again when I was 23, and I got invited into Daniel's group because they needed another player, and I fell in love all over again.
Welcome aboard, Daniel.
I'm Daniel. I started playing D&D shortly after I got out of high school. Didn't have a good DM, but searched out, found Ryan, and found a really good DM. Lost it for a while and got back in with these guys, and yeah,
I don't
enjoy the
know.
hangouts.
Yeah, welcome to the hangout.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Like, I've been playing role-playing for a few times. I haven't played a lot of D&D. I've played a lot of role-playing games. For those of you who watch my streams, you know that. For those of you who don't, well, I'm not really talking to you. Um,
You're not talking to me?
yeah, you need to watch my stream more. So yeah, there's lots of nice stuff that way. Um, the camera cut out. Awesome. So yeah, like, how has role-playing and stuff like impacted, you know, the way you see stories and the way stories are being told and that kind of thing?
It's given me a well-rounded view of what stories are. Like it often makes me notice like bad tropes in movies, like oh, evil guy is evil because evil or stuff like that, and it makes me see things more well-rounded. Where I think about motivations of characters that I wouldn't really normally notice, and about consequences, and about really bad tropes that are used over and over again in movies and TV shows.
Yeah, I can see that. I have to agree with you. Like, it's definitely, I'm gonna have to reflect. It's definitely changing the way, like, I've looked at it, and especially like that bad guy is bad because of bad, and it just why is this guy a compelling bad guy? How does it change like my perception of it? And if I was that bad guy, how would I go about doing it if I was controlling like that character?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of, and when we go into characters like that, like, what makes a believable character, right? Because obviously, like, what makes one believable? What makes one fun to play? Like, I'm just kind of curious. Like, what do you guys find like really fun to play as a character, or like, why play a character the certain way you do?
Generally, I like playing characters who have a lot of flaws and need to work on some of their abilities because a lot of people in real life do connect with people who have these major character flaws that are really affecting them. And usually I like playing that because it gets you to not only look at that for your character, but in real life, as it were.
Yeah. I'm the same way. Like I've had a few talks with Ryan, the DM, about giving my character flaws because he's getting really high levels, really powerful now. So I've been looking for ways to give him flaws to make sure he's still interesting to play and all that. And I seek out flaws as well.
And I have to say I do similar things. And like, when it goes back to min-maxing, for those of you who don't know what that means, it means maxing out or being really proficient in like a few skills rather than just okay at a bunch of skills. When it comes to something like min-maxing or becoming like a super powerful person, I find, for me anyways, that it really doesn't become a fun character to play anymore. Especially if you like start one-shotting things or everything's just really easy for your character to do. Like, it almost takes away the enjoyment of that character, of making him a believable character, of you wanting to believe in that character or that person. You know, and I think that's what role playing is putting yourself into those roles, as it were, and acting out your own story, whether it be in video games, um, real life, LARPing, D&D, like anything like that. Um, so I like, with that note, like, what makes a character not fun to play, not fun to to use, not fun to be around.
But I don't know. Like, there's a player that I had to actually had to remove from the group that I DM recently, and he was an example of somebody who was not making it fun to play, and well, he was a bad power gamer and min maxer, and he constantly sought after being uber and being powerful, and he wanted to leave all the other players in the dust, and he didn't care if it was good role playing as long as he was able to like rule the show and rule the stage, and his character was always one dimensional and didn't really follow alignment, and didn't really follow what he was going to do. Like he was a lawful good cleric, and he wanted to wither the limbs of the mage who accidentally burned his wings and all that. And it, I don't know. He wanted to punish those who would dare be more powerful than him. And it made it not fun to play for everybody else.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. Yeah. Yeah. And so with that, what you've obviously taken on the role of both a DM and a player, and I think Daniel, I don't, if you have as well at one point, but I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I've been a DM once or twice.
There we go. Okay, so like once there's obviously separate roles. Which one do you guys like? What are the good and bad sides of each role that you guys like enjoying, and like how does that apply to when you play or when you DM dungeon? Create everything, and like how do you take, for example, some experiences from being a dungeon master and apply them to being a player, or vice versa?
One thing I definitely took from becoming a DM is, besides the respect for DMs, because it's a lot of extra work, and like 95% of what you prepare, your players aren't going to use anyway because they might follow a different hook than what you want them to. But yeah, that's the one thing I picked up, that when I go back as a player, I'm going to listen for hooks and make it easier on the DM, so I can, if you spend a whole bunch of time setting up this hook with a big storyline, kind of trust that he has something good for me, and not just go off to butt fuck nowhere where he has nothing prepared and then he has to improvise for 3 hours.
Yep.
So you're saying, if they want you to explore the cathedrals, per se, blowing it up generally just doesn't go with a good storyline.
Probably,
Technically, that
yeah.
was a theater.
What about you, Daniel?
Well, I have to agree with Brandon that yes, you do take a lot out from being a DM to a player. You notice the story hooks and where the person wants to go. The thing that you miss when you're a DM is you miss fucking over the plans, as it were. Whereas when you're a DM, you kind of miss that enjoyment of not knowing what's going to happen next or what the enemies are going to do. And what's happening behind the scenes. Because even Ryan says he wants to tell us what's going to happen, what's happening in different areas. And as the DM, you really don't have any of your players that you can really tell. So you have all this bottled up joy that you want to like explode everywhere, and there's really nothing you can tell your players without giving away some important plot hook or something like that.
Yeah, I totally get his emotion now about how he's excited to tell things, because you spend all this time and creativity creating something that you're really proud of, and that you think is creative, you think is interesting, you think your players would enjoy, and when they don't go for it, you just have this empty hook, and you just have this energy inside you want to tell in this story, but like now it's never gonna happen, so you're just like, eh.
Yeah, and then you also feel that if you reintroduce it a different way, it kind of feels cheap, so you just never use it.
Well, yeah, like there's this one story hook where I was gonna get my players to go out, and basically this gnome used a bunch of machinery parts to animate a castle. So like a castle turned into a transformer style like stone Goliath robot thing, and that was gonna happen somewhere. That was gonna happen somewhere far off in the hook I wanted them to take. but they didn't take that hook. So I was just like, "Kai, fine, there's a castle in the city, and just because I want it to happen." And it didn't turn out as well as I thought it would, because like I kind of just placed it in the city because I wanted it to happen instead of because it should happen.
Yeah. If
Yeah.
you don't let it just happen naturally, it just doesn't feel the same at all. Whereas with players, they don't know that they're not getting that, so they don't have that sense of loss. So
Yeah.
that's the one thing that I do like being as a player. Although, as being a player, the effects that your actions have and don't have, I do enjoy that quite a bit. Like, for instance, if you accidentally say something that you didn't want to say to a NPC and all of a sudden they hate you or you end up in jail, like all of us have happened once in a while in our
Yeah.
games, it just it's fun to have those little things happen. Whereas when you're a DM, if something happens to one of your favorite characters, it doesn't really matter because you have 18 other favorite characters, so
Well,
you
yeah.
don't
And
get as much attachment to them.
yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
I can get that. That makes sense to me. Like especially like favorite characters part, and like that would kill me to have all this story stuff and nothing happening. That's cool. Of favorite characters, like what if you can think back to any of your characters, what was A, the most fun to play, and B, probably your favorite character currently? Or like, out of all the characters you played, which one do you consider your favorite kind of thing?
Well, I've just dipped my toe into role playing recently. Like I was actually only in Ryan's campaign before I started DMing in mine, and I really enjoy my dwarf named Ood Gallifrey, and he's basically the ultimate boxer. He can punch harder than anybody on the strand, and no no I've really become attached to him. Like he's just an aloof little street smart book dumb dwarf that loves to drink and punch. And I really like. I think if you were to die, like I think I would go through some kind of like real genuine mourning over my character. And it's
Yeah.
it's weird to explain that to people who aren't role players, but I think I would.
Yeah, I think that when you do roleplay and you are playing one major character throughout that entire time, it's almost like you throw your identity on top of that person. So if that person dies, it's essentially a part of you that is being ripped away, and you can never play that character again. Even if he comes back to life again, it's like being the DM. It's cheap. It it you realize that you can lose him and get him back, so you're not as attached anymore.
Yeah,
Makes
yeah, and,
sense.
and like I like in my campaign, every one of my players except for one is a brand new player, so they're just getting attached to their characters now. And when I add some foreshadowing and all that, and just to scare them and all that, like they're generally scared that I'm gonna kill their characters. And it's kind of weird seeing it from the other side of the table.
Yeah.
Start from level 1.
Yep. And generally, your first character is usually the one that you have the most attachment to. It doesn't matter how many characters you play beyond, your first character is usually your favorite. I remember my first character was a elven ninja. Of course, he was great at everything, but the problem was my dice sucked at everything. So he could climb a tree, jump out of a tree, and do all that. But what really happens is he tried to climb a tree, didn't make it, well, it took him about an hour to climb a tree, only to jump out and break both of his legs. And then forget he broke his legs and try and kick down a door.
Sounds like a delightful character to have on an adventure.
Yeah, like when you first play, you make all those stupid mistakes that bring back the stories. You know,
Makes
like
sense.
putting glass into people's shoes or cutting up their feet
Yeah.
to get some hospital services.
Yeah. How do you think the best way to get new players into something like this? And like you said, Brandon, a lot of your guys are all new people, and you were new bringing in and I know like I've had a few friends that I've brought in to take even just to listen or take a look at it, and it can be intimidating. Like it's something a lot of people don't do.
Well, Well, there's a lot of anxiety with with my new players because really like when you're creating a character, like it's a whole bunch of stuff at once, and you're throwing a lot of numbers that they don't know what they are at them. And I found the best way whenever I introduce a new character is to have somebody with them that's more experienced, and I just take them on a random like hour-long one-shot where they battle some simple enemy like a troll or something like that, and yeah, like just kind of something introductory so they can dip their toes in, and always try to be slow and patient because I remember when I was a first-time player and I had to have everything explained to me. I didn't know nothing. So.
That makes sense. Daniel? Did Daniel die?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I got distracted there for a moment.
I could tell. Bringing
Yeah.
new players into the game.
Definitely a great way to do it is introducing them to games that are fairly similar and simpler. A good example of a board game that's similar and simpler is something like, let's say, Defenders of Andor. It's a fairly recent game, but you play as adventurers who go out for a predetermined thing. Everybody is a player, and you just work on a storyline that's randomly generated by cards. So they get the feel, and they start to get their feet wet with getting attached to characters and what they can do with certain things. So you introduce them to something simple and simpler.
Yeah, I could see that.
And
That's actually a really good way about doing it. I never really thought about it that way.
yeah,
Because, choosing something really similar to what you're doing, or even like the way I'm thinking about it, now I'm thinking about it, like those old kind of choose your own adventure books, right?
yeah,
Then there's ones you can also get stats in them.
yeah.
So
And
yeah,
the best way I found it to explain D&D to somebody or role playing in general to somebody who isn't a role player is like you imagine a video game, and like a video game, you're in a like a lot of them, you're basically in a giant hallway where you can either walk this way or that way, but you're not allowed to go into certain parts of the landscape because the programmers haven't developed it. You're not allowed to do certain things because you can only press
You
A
hit the
button or B
invisible
button.
wall.
Yeah, yeah, and with D&D, you don't have that. You don't have A and B in only one path. You can literally go anywhere and do anything as long as you're willing to deal with the consequences. Like there is no limits. It's all up to a roll of the dice, and you can do anything you want in that world.
Yeah, it's all up to the roll of the dice and the grace of the DM usually.
Yeah.
Sometimes some DMs are not as forgiving as others.
yeah,
I,
that
I've
makes sense.
found, yeah, I've found that a path that I take is if my players get me excited and say something that sounds cool, I'll usually go way easier on them on the dice roll. Like if they
Yeah,
say I run up his blade and I stab him in the face, I'm like, oh, that's cool. Okay, I'll just gonna let it happen then. You can do that.
That's acceptable. All right. When you think of like other games, like role-playing games and stuff, and it's telling stories and stuff, like I was really, well, I still am, not as much as I used to because the newer ones kind of, but I was really, really into the Final Fantasy series growing up. The Mass Effect series was another one that I just fell in love with the universe and the people in it, and like that's I think like a really good way to explain it to someone is like getting drawn into the story, because generally speaking, like except for like Mass Effect had a good battle system, but like generally the Final Fantasy battle system is very very simplistic, right? Like
yes.
it's I hit A, he walks up, he hits a thing, and so the story has to be that much more involving to get you through the game. And I think that was one of the strongest things about them early on was the stories in them. Um, and I think that those story elements are what you really got to focus on hooking people, because that's what you're doing, right? You're role playing a story. You're using the people with you to tell a story. Like as
Yeah.
much as it's about the world they're in, it's about the characters. They are the main characters. Like because without them, the story wouldn't happen.
Yeah, and sometimes I'm intimidated by that challenge because like games like Mass Effect or Final Fantasy, like they have a team of professional writers that full-time job is to create the story. And with my campaign, it's just me. I have to create something that'll both enthrall and excite them and get them inspired to go for the things that are in the story and to pick up hooks and stuff like that. It's intimidating sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the other thing is you really have to read your players because some players are looking for more in-depth world history and background of it. Like for us, we want to know what's happening with politics, what's happening with trade, what are the enemies thinking. Whereas some people are just concerned about, is there a really big scary monster? Can I hit it with my axe?
that's true. But
Yeah. It's just that's more interesting because the game can be geared towards what you're looking for. It doesn't have to be, is it Final Fantasy? Is it Fight Club? Is it whatever? It's what the DM is made for you. It's essentially gourmet gaming.
Yeah. And that's something I ran into now. Like I just had a new girl join my group, and my other players they're very much hack and slash players where they want to find the next thing they can beat up, and they want to get lots of loot and gold so they can buy cool stuff. But this new girl to join, she's really interested in the politics and the motivations behind people who play. So I find myself splitting in between different DM roles where I give a little bit to stuff that she would like and a little bit more to my hack and slash players and stuff like that.
that makes sense. What draws you out of the story? Like what makes it not interesting to be a part of that world? Like, obviously we've all played a fair amount of it. Like even if we just got into it, like we've been playing for quite some time now together. In case anyone
About a year.
didn't get this, that we played D&D together. Like what draws you out of that story, not just that, but like other games you might have played with stories or stuff like that. Like going back to my Final Fantasy thing, I remember Final Fantasy 12. I was really interested in the story, but got backlogged with the side quests and the long time it took me to progress to the next thing, and then I was just like, I just don't care anymore. Like,
Yeah, and spending hours and hours grinding to get to the next level, so you can actually meet the boss.
Hmm.
I don't know. Like you guys have DMs. Like, what do you have any like rules that you've put forward, like to yourself? Be like, all right, I am not doing this because that is not a good idea.
No, I try not to be too cliche. My players they watch anime and they watch TV shows. They're used to the normal tropes of that. So I try and do stuff that's creative because I feel like if I introduce a storyline that's really cliche and like it's too simple, that they're not going to take it seriously, and they're not gonna have proper motivations for their characters because they're not going to take it seriously. So I try and be creative and I try and have rounded ideas, like realistic ideas and storylines.
I can get that. And what about you, Daniel? When you DM'd or something like that?
Definitely when I DM, I tend to think too logically at times, so it usually gets bogged down with details and whatnot. So I've made a point at certain points in the game, I have to interject something absolutely ludicrous just to break up that feeling. Like, for instance, they're hunting down a mass murderer or something who's killed the entire village, and they turn around and they find out that it's a gnome who was trying to prove himself to a fairy. Just something ludicrous and unexpected.
All right, fair enough.
When all fingers point towards a werewolf, and all it is a gnome.
Yeah,
All right, I
I
can
also
get
I also like to defy my players' expectations, like whether there's this big brute that hangs out in the town they're in right now, and they haven't met him yet, but he's supposed to be a red herring, where they all think he's gonna be the bad guy, but really really it's his scrawny little son that he abuses. That's the big bad guy. And I'm trying to throw red flags away just to kind of to see that they shouldn't go along with what they first think. They actually have to do some in-depth stuff, and if they actually think it through, then they realize this big bad guy couldn't be the bad guy. It doesn't make sense, but his son could be, that. And I'd like to defy their expectations because, of course, if they only took 2 seconds to think about it, then they would think that, of course, this big bad brute would be the bad guy, but really he isn't.
That's a good way of looking at it. Yeah. Yeah. So, like, besides obviously the player characters, do you guys have any like memorable characters that you remember that were just like characters on the side, or ones that your own characters interacted with?
Oh, oh no, one that one of my players got actually attached to is he's playing a prostitute right now, and he's got a bunch of underground connections. And he was asking, can I use my underground connections? Can I find somebody who like makes like bathroom basements potions and all that? And I said, yeah, sure. You probably have somebody that makes kind of half-assed potions out of random chemicals he finds. And he's actually become a big part in the campaign now. And at first they invited him to live in their house, and now that they're traveling the world, they actually reserved a whole section of the ship for him in his laboratory so he can make these half-assed potions. And like my players have been on a few quests now, so they have a lot of gold, but they still want to buy these really disgusting half-assed potions from this other guy because they really like him. I always enjoyed that.
In my first campaign that I played, I had that elf, and I had a side character who I always kept around, and she was a 90-year-old woman that I pretty much waited on hand and foot, and until the end of the game, nobody really knew why I took care of this person. I always called her my pet, and everybody just thought I was being a real ass of an elf, as I usually play. But it turned out that that was my character's wife that he had married nearly a century ago, and he was keeping true to his promises. And when she got devoured by wolves, it was just heart-wrenching.
Well,
We were trying to take her out of the city before werewolves got there, and apparently it wasn't werewolves that were coming, it was just a group of hunters who just wanted to kill everybody in the town. Kind of bizarre.
Awesome.
The dangers of marrying a human, eh?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
werewolves, wolves, same difference.
Yeah. That's kind of funny. uh, so yeah.
There's something I've thought about recently is like an elf marrying a human, or even a dwarf marrying a human. These long-lived races, living ones with finite lives, and it'd be kind of funny. It'd be like an Edward and Bella situation. As much as I hate to make that comparison, but that's the only one that comes to mind right now.
I would have thought something like, if you're going to choose any long-lived race against a eternal race, I would have chose Aragorn and Eowyn, probably.
Oh yeah,
Even though
that would work.
Yeah, even though Aragorn will live for hundreds of years, he's still going to die.
Yeah.
We all know this. And, in certain situations, the eternal race will stick with them until they die, and other ones will just leave so that they don't have to deal with the pain. Be like, oh, they're still alive somewhere. It's only been 2,000 years. They're probably still alive.
Yeah. So yeah. So today's gonna be a bit of a shorter broadcast, just because we got started later. I'd like to do more of these in the future, if you guys are up for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally, man.
I'll plan it a little bit better now that we know how to use this. It'll work much better. So, thank you guys for joining me. It was a really good time, really good introduction to like role playing and kind of our experiences and what we got from it. I hope I hope all of you who will be watching this have enjoyed it. If you have any suggestions for future topics we would like to talk to, just drop us a line. So I guess, do you guys have anything you want to say before we leave?
if you ever wanted to try D&D but haven't because of the stigma, like, you know, the stigma is nearly gone. Like, I've met cops and emergency room doctors who are role players, so don't be afraid to do it because I can find that it's really rewarding, and it allows people that don't have any other creative outlet to have a creative outlet. So if you want to try it, just try it.
I would say if you're looking to introduce people into role playing without getting them into playing a role playing game like D&D or going out and buying an expensive board game, download Fiasco. It's on tabletops. They have a free link there, and it's just an easy way to get people to role play characters that they just make up on the fly, and it's fairly interesting to play.
That's a good point. And in fact, I'll link. I'll put a link to Fiasco's Tabletop's episode of Fiasco in the comment section, so that people can click it and go watch Will Wheaton be sexy. Anyways, so this
That's
is
every episode.
Yeah, that's I'm the bacon eating man. So anyways, this is Duo Out. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for joining us today.